Hi, everybody. Uh, this is wonderful. It's so great to see so many people from Bill's life here. Uh, we are live streaming this, and I know that many of Bill's former students and friends from around the country, maybe even around the world, I'm not really sure, are watching too. Uh, and that's a beautiful thing. Bill was a fascinating man who touched so many lives with what he did, and I'm really, really looking forward to hearing from you all. But I am going to take the organizer's privilege, I guess, and talk for a few minutes first. Just some housekeeping. There's wonderful Bill memorabilia over here, including many of his books. Be sure to check them out. Also, the obituary from the Times and a beautiful obituary that Joelle wrote, and a history of the founding of SHRP. So there are stacks of those, and be sure to take one. We can't possibly give you all that information, from the microphone, but those documents will really fill in the blanks, I think, in a terrific way. Food is over here. Bathroom is down the hall. Drinks. We even have vodka martinis in honor of Bill. He loved his vodka martinis. So, uh, I'm I'm a nonfiction writer, which is really just a pretentious way of saying that I'm a journalist, which is really a pretentious way of saying that I'm a reporter, which is really just a pretentious way of saying that I'm an ink-stained wretch, just like many of you all. And certainly, like Bill, he would wear that label proudly. And as people in the Ink-Stained Wretch Club, we're supposed to only speak the truth, but I'm going to violate that rule slightly because at least at the beginning, I really feel like speaking about Bill in the present tense and not in the past tense. He's in my mind a lot, just like I suspect he's in the minds of many of you, all the people who he loved and who loved him, who love him, especially his family, including his longtime partner and now best friend, Joelle, and his daughter, Lara, his son-in-law, Human, and his beloved grandchildren, Tommy and Sophie. I just know that it means so much to him that you are all here. I'm imagining Bill or hearing Bill in my head ranting about Donald Trump, rolling back the Enlightenment, as he used to always say, or really irked about the latest cuts in journalism, this profession that he loved so much. Or quite often, Bill, you're just in despair about the Columbia football team, which he would always insist on calling the Kittens instead of the Lions. So Bill really loves a good joke, as you all know. And when he hears a joke that he likes, he repeats it a lot. Here's one he told me at least 20 times, always with glee, like more glee each time. When Dr. Lara J. Burrows was in high school, I told her that I like turkey. Well, Dad, she replied, you are what you eat. God, he loved that joke. He loved his daughter and how quick-witted she was. He loved being the butt of his own jokes, too. So there are a lot of people here who have known Bill so well for so long that it would be silly of me to try to summarize his life here, especially because we really want to leave time for everyone who wants to speak to speak. Plus, there's all those wonderful readings on the table. So please do read them. Just for fun, though, I did look through Bill's personnel file, which is surely a violation of multiple laws. Sorry, Bill. I found many interesting items, but I'll just bring a couple to your attention. Here's Bill, after just having gotten his job offer in 1974 for the job of his dreams to be a faculty member in the journalism department at NYU. He'd just gotten the good news from Dick Petro, who became his close friend. Dick's son, I think, is coming. There he is. Great. He can fill in more of the blanks here. He'd just gotten the news that he had been offered this job. Dear Professor Petro, gad, you guys work fast. If I sounded speechless over the phone this afternoon, it's because I was. Thank you so much, not only for your decision, but for not keeping me dangling. I look forward to finalizing things as soon as possible into a productive and rewarding career there. And oh my God, was he productive. He wrote and wrote and wrote. We don't have all of the books over there, but we have many of them. Is Art here? Do we have them all? Yeah, okay. So we got just about all those books. And there were so many of them. He never really lost his enthusiasm, unlike some of my faculty colleagues who really don't realize what a great job this is. We're journalists, we just complain. Flash forward a few years later to 1980. Bill is now the department chair, having experienced a meteoric rise to that august position. So in his annual review, he's asked, what was your greatest accomplishment in 1979? And he answers, getting through the renovation and my first semester as chairman without having a nervous breakdown. I'll leave it to anyone from that area, or maybe Joel, to tell us whether in fact that's true, and he didn't have a nervous breakdown. But one thing we know is that Bill did not like being chair of the department. No one really likes being chair of the department. Charles, am I right about that? Yeah. Yeah. It's a thankless job. And Bill wanted to develop an escape strategy. It wasn't just an escape strategy. He had also noticed that a lot of the science coverage that he saw in the popular press was really lousy, and he thought it was dangerous, especially after the 3 Mile Island accident. And he decided that what NYU needed was a science journalism track, a science journalism program. I don't think people really understand what an incredibly creative and innovative idea that was at the time. I like to say that we're the very first science journalism program. I think BU, whose program doesn't exist anymore, got started right about at the same time. Santa Cruz shortly thereafter. But Bill didn't have any model to base SERP on. So he came up with an entirely new curriculum, and it was really hard to do. Here's another little gem from the personnel file, from the period when Bill was trying to start SERP, now SHERP, and he was running into some resistance from the science departments around the university. I'm very familiar with that problem. Because, academic scientists thought all journalists were idiots. Which was, of course, exactly what Bill was trying to fix. Bill was alarmed by the awfulness of the coverage, so in response to the flack he was getting from the science departments, who didn't really understand or like this idea of creating a science journalism program, he wrote a long and pretty hilarious memo. One of the most memorable lines he was dead serious about. He wrote, "If you consider yourself to be serious about the tenets of liberal democracy and the benefits of broad dissemination of knowledge, then what you ought to be doing with journalists and aspiring journalists who don't understand your discipline is teach them," in capital letters. And that's what he did. He was an evangelist for the idea of creating, training, molding journalists who would cover science with sophistication and accuracy and passion. And it's such an honor to help continue his legacy with this program that is going strong all those years later. So for the full story on how he created SERP, I definitely commend you Bobby Grant's excellent history that we created, that Bobby wrote for the 25th anniversary. We're up to the 43s now, so 43rd class. So that the 25th anniversary coincided with Bill's retirement from teaching, but of course not from writing. He was always cooking up a book. Even near the end, even when Bill maybe knew it wasn't really going to happen, he never stopped talking about his next project, whatever it was going to be. After thousands of bylines in his long career, his last one, I think, was an op-ed published in the Miami Herald, and it was predictably future forward. It was about space. The headline was, "Welcome to your new home, Earthlings. This is what this new space race is all about." And it was about the privatization of space travel. And he thought about that with his sort of patented combination of cynicism and optimism. He was simultaneously both. He was skeptical because all great journalists are skeptical, but he was also optimistic. He believed in the future. For a guy who had been in the business so long, he was always looking ahead. After he retired, older alums who Bill had taught frequently asked about him and would tell me to pass along their good wishes to him, which I always did, and he loved that. Even more, he liked speaking directly to his former students instead of just through me. And since he wanted all of his students to call him Mom, he claimed Mother's Day as his own birthday. But the students didn't actually know that, so if they weren't in touch with him on that particular day, he would invariably send me a complaining email. "It's sob Mother's Day and no sob cards, not a single sniff phone call or email. No offers of a week in Paris or lunch with Angelina Jolie poolside at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Nothing. This happens every year. I'm thinking about doing something exotic to forget. Something in an exciting new environment, like taking a week's vacation in the beautiful mountains around Kabul. Love, Mother." And he would send me these things, and I wasn't really sure how to respond. Was a response even called for? I don't know. But I would respond. Early in the pandemic, I wrote to ask how he was doing, and he told me, "Dr. Bill Burrows has put me under house arrest, but I have laid in the bare essentials: milk, eggs, OJ, coffee, veggies, chicken, meat, and 3 liters of vodka. Stay cool and don't get breathed on." That's what he told me. Bill definitely thought a lot about his legacy, especially during and after his retirement. At the 25th anniversary, when he heard that we had created a scholarship fund in his name, he was incredibly excited. But of course, he also had a joke ready. "Does this mean that I'm officially dead?" he asked. Again, I didn't really know how to respond, but I assured him it did not mean that he was dead, but it did mean that we wanted him to know how important he is to this program while he is still alive to appreciate it. And he appreciated that. Bill really loved his writing. He cared a lot about his writing. He cared about his teaching. But I think in the end, he sensed that SERP, now SHERP, was just as important, at least, a legacy, and probably even more important. He told me it was the closest thing he could imagine to immortality. Since then, we've raised and given away several $100,000 contributed by you, by alumni and friends in Bill's honor. Every penny we raised has gone to a deserving SHERP student. I really don't want this to be a fundraiser, but I do think that it's appropriate to hear from one person who most recently benefited from your largesse, your contributions in Bill's honor. The most recent Burrows Alumni Fellow is Carrie Klein. She's a Sherp 42. Carrie's actually in Pittsburgh today, or she'd be with us. But I did want to read a note that she wrote. And, you know, if it convinces you to make a contribution to the Burrows Fund, you won't get any objections from me. There are cards on the table. Here's what Carrie said. Shortly after graduating from college, where I did not study journalism, I realized I wanted to be a journalist. It was unfortunate timing, but also the best thing that has happened to me. I got my first taste of journalism at a nonprofit outlet in NYC, where I volunteered to write and report, and they volunteered to teach me how. For my first story, I attended a community meeting where neighbors were fighting a gas pipeline expansion. I didn't know the right way to report. Take notes, record everything. I did both. I was scared to speak with people, but once I did, I loved it. I loved how I could learn about a new topic with each story, while also helping others learn about the things I cared about, like climate change and energy and local politics. But I was doing all that on the side while working on other jobs. I wanted journalism to be my future, but I didn't know how to get there. One day, scrolling through science journalists on LinkedIn who had the careers I wanted, I came across Sherp, Science, Health, and Environmental Reporting at NYU. That existed? My heart raced and I rapidly Googled the program. It was perfect for me. All the topics I was excited about. I can't describe the joy I felt when I got my first email from Dan, titled, "Carrie, want to talk? NYU Sherp?" I called my mom. Does this mean I got in? She didn't know. I didn't know either. I didn't know either. I hadn't decided. As it turned out, Dan liked my writing. He thought I could be a science journalist. His faith in me propelled me forward and made me confident that Sherp was the right place for me. A few weeks later, he let me know I had been awarded the Bill Burrows Alumni Scholarship, which made it possible for me to attend the program and not only solidified my spot at NYU, but I truly believe solidified my future as a science and environmental journalist. I never had the chance to meet Bill Burrows himself, but I'm endlessly grateful to him for starting SERP, now Sherp. I can tell that his spirit of generosity, support, and curiosity has seeped into the heart of the program. I'm grateful to all of the alumni who've contributed to his fund that makes it possible for more young people to get into science journalism, where they are desperately needed. I'm honored to have received this scholarship and immensely excited to step out into the world when I graduate this December with the support of Sherp behind me. I mean, that's Bill's legacy in a very tangible way. Once when I was telling him about how influential he still is in the lives of his former students, I said, "Bill, you're going to have a fantastic funeral." He loved that. He would repeat it to me over and over and over. "Remember that time when you said I was going to have a funeral?" And I would say, "Yes, I remember, Bill." So this isn't exactly a funeral. It's really a celebration. But here's our chance to give him the send-off he deserves. And Bill, I hope you enjoy it. So with that, I will happily turn over the microphone to all of you. We don't have any kind of organized plan. I thought people could just come up and speak as the Spirit moves them. No one should feel obligated, but everyone should feel very welcome to do so. Who would like to go first? Go for it. The steps are right over here. Oh, yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you for that tribute to Bill. I'm sure we all appreciated it. Well, was it really necessary to include his mug shot in the photo montage?
That's Joel's fault.
Hey, Bill and I go way, way back. We are among the last alumni of what we call the Sam Solowitz School of Journalism. I'm sure Joel has heard about this 1,000 times. Bill and I always had the same conversation about it. Sam was the head of the night copy boy staff at the New York Times. And he was about this high. And he took it out on everybody, especially the night copy boys. And he had a philosophy expressed as, Bill and I used to answer the phone with these expressions to each other, right? "You came here looking for work, didn't you? No sitting down." Nobody told Bill not to go to work in new shoes. So he couldn't sit down. Guess what happened to his feet, right, after 8 hours? Anyway, Sam taught us the basics, not of journalism, but of newspapers, of newspapering, how to go work with the printers in the composing room, how to go to the engraving department and find somebody's picture that had already been engraved so we could get it into the paper after the engravers had gone home, that sort of thing. And Bill and I learned a lot from Sam and our colleagues at the paper, and it was basically kind of an apprenticeship program, and I've always appreciated it, and Bill and I will tell each other the same stories over and over. So I just want to add, though, that near the end of Bill's life, last summer I guess it was, when he was already living in his place up in East Haven, my most recent book came out. I don't have quite as many as he does, but we were in a race, you know. And it was a book about a famous foreign correspondent for the New York Herald Tribune and the New York Times. And Bill, who needed my help to wheel his chair down the hall to lunch, nevertheless bought 13 copies of my book, and he got me to sign them and mail them to friends and people he knew in the business and people he cared about he thought would want to read it. Bill didn't have to do that. Those may be the only 13 copies of the book anybody bought. But there was never a time when it wasn't a pleasure to talk to Bill and when I wasn't proud to be his friend. I'm glad you're all here.
Hi, everyone. My name's Jay Petro. My father hired Richard was my father, and he hired Bill, and Bill constantly talked about this. The picture up on the screen is David Rubin and Bill and my father on the beach in Southampton. They used to come out to my parents' house, and there it is up there. And they obviously were having a very good time. My mother also, he always said that she was like his sister, his lost sister. And Bill was, I've known Bill since I was very young, growing up in Forest Hills. And later, he moved up to Westport. And I live in Westport, Connecticut. And we used to go out and hang out. And I would witness his one martini a night, which was a very big one. And I used to visit him a couple of times up in New Haven. East Haven. And anyway, I was just sort of trying to remember all the things that he constantly would tell me, which was repeated often. And I used to always say, "Oh, hello, Mr. Bill," because Mr. Bill was always from that little squeaky toy that used to get abused. And he used to laugh every single time, even though it was the same joke. So we had that in common. But he wrote an email to me which sort of summarizes a little bit of what he used to always say. So he said, "I just read Steve's excellent preliminary reviews," my brother's a writer, "in my new assisted living abode in East Haven, Connecticut, which seems to be just east of Timbuktu. And it looks great. I will surely buy at least one and probably several for other geezers." He always called himself a geezer, I know. "Other than that, I am doing nothing and totally enjoying it, except that I miss the, quote, old neighborhood, as they say in the middle of Queens. And you and Nancy, my wife, I hope the business and the painting are going well and that you guys are thriving. As for me, I'm feeling great at age, oh my God, 84. So this was 3 years ago. For 3 reasons. Number 1, I never exercise. People who exercise are always breaking something. Number 2, I eat food that's full of preservatives. And number 3, I have a large vodka on the rocks at 5:15 every day because what my high school biology teacher told us turns out to be true. Alcohol is a preservative." And then he always quoted Lara, "Only if you're a frog or a fetal pig, Dad. Oink, oink." Anyway, that's Bill, and I miss him. He was like my uncle, and Joel has said that I was like his son that he never had. So he was a great guy. Thanks.
This is going to be something like chronological order. It's nice. I was hired by Dick Petro and David Rubin and Bill Burrows when I was 27 years old, somehow to teach journalism, of which I had not done a lot. And I learned almost everything I learned about journalism from Bill Burrows. He was my mentor. When I taught classes at the beginning, as some of the rest of us did, we used the notes he made for his book, or we used an early draft of his book, and then we assigned his book, Writing and Reporting the News. And he had an ethic. He had a belief about journalism and its importance that I think spread through the department, and I'd like to think is still there, is still here, which is that it's important, that it has to be done right, that it has to be done straight, that there was no lazy way of doing journalism. And that was crucial for me. Bill Burrows is also probably well, I should say that I taught journalism at NYU for 46 years, and Bill was probably responsible for 39 of them, because he played a big role in getting me tenure. And he became a friend, a delightful friend, because of his sense of humor, because of his warmth. I also, my last book also got the Bill treatment, sent to everybody, all these copies that he asked me to autograph. He was a big-hearted, spirited, incredibly accomplished. I don't think I was the only one who was blown away reading the obituary in the Times. I mean, I knew a lot of it, a whole lot of it, but I didn't know all of it. And it's incredible, all the things he accomplished in his life, starting with Sherp. So I miss him dearly, and I owe him a lot.
So maybe I'll jump in with the first of several emailed comments from folks who really wanted to be here but couldn't, including Bill's longtime friend Steve Solomon, also from the faculty. Steve's home with a back injury. Steve says, Bill was a great friend and a mentor to me for more than 4 decades. I first met Bill about 6 months before he launched SERP as a new program at NYU. The two of us sat in his office for several hours, and I'll never forget his passion about striking out in a new direction in journalism education. He believed we needed more than the legacy journalism programs that focused on the medium of communication, than magazine, newspaper, broadcasting. That wasn't sufficient anymore. His idea, as he explained it to me, was a curriculum designed to prepare young journalists equipped to inform the public on challenging subjects that required technical knowledge. We talked about it, and after that lively discussion, Bill asked me with that big smile and hearty voice, so do you want to teach a SERP course here in the fall? I said sure, and with Bill's faith in me, I began teaching as an adjunct. A decade later, when I joined the full-time faculty, Bill immediately began lobbying me to start another specialized concentration, this one to educate students in the coverage of business and economics. On his urging and with his support, including many conversations about curriculum, I started NYU's Business and Economic Reporting program. 25 years later, more than 300 BR alumni have Bill's inspiration to thank for their expertise in business journalism. Yeah, that's pretty good, but Sherp has more than 500 alums. How about that? Bill's vision and his relentless support of substantive reporting were on the forefront of a movement to improve journalism education and the coverage of science, health, and environmental reporting. and really all specializations. Bill did something remarkable. He started something that has spread like wildfire across journalism schools in the U.S. and around the world. And that's the idea of specialized training. So back to Steve, we're all enormously grateful for that. And personally, I treasure the many, many years of his friendship. Okay, who else would like to go? Come on up. Okay, and then you're next.
Hello, everyone. My name is Basil Hero, and there seems to be a common theme here, which was Bill buying the books that we've written, sending them out to all of his friends, and I remember sitting there and doing my signature for about 20 of the books. I honestly feel like the universe put us together. He was my next door neighbor. And when Hurricane Sandy hit, the power in Westport went out, kind of like Lower Manhattan. And he had just moved in. And by some peculiar quirk of the Westport power grid, our condos, which Joel knows very well, the upper floor had power, the lower floor did not. He didn't know that. So I came in with a bunch of extension cords and rigged it up so that his refrigerator would work, and of course he could ice his vodkas and still enjoy his 5 o'clock drink. The moment I walked into his place, I saw just reams of Post-it notes. We are the space race, and this and that. And I said, you know, we've not met yet, but what's your name? And I said, are you the same Bill Burrows that wrote This New Ocean? And he, a big smile of his, which could just light up an auditorium, said yes. And from that point on, I think we must have visited every day at 5 o'clock. And I'm not a drinker. So he'd look at me a little, you know, is this guy all right here? But in any event, he served as a wonderful inspiration for my own book. I love him dearly. And what his contribution to the historical record is in terms of books about space exploration and other things. He was working on the asteroid threat, actually, when we first met. He has an enormous body of work, 12 books. And I thank him, and I think we all owe him a big round of applause for his accomplishment, his generosity, and just a light, you know. He just beamed energy and optimism. I can't remember who threw cynicism in there, which is a trademark of journalists. I know I was one at one point when there was still real journalism going on. And I think it's still happening in many areas. But in any event, thank you, Joel, for telling me about the memorial here, and bless you all.
So while the next person comes up, I will just read a quick comment from an alum while the next person comes up. This is from Abby Leonard, who's a Sherp 23, which means that she was really Bill's last sort of full-time class as a professor. And he hadn't lost his touch. Here's what Abby said. Bill Burrows was a kind, brilliant man who absolutely changed my life. I first met him as a recent college graduate and not sure what to do next, though I had a strong suspicion I wanted to be a journalist. I had just gone to an introductory panel at Columbia J School and was so totally put off by its pretentiousness, tell me about it, that I remember thinking, maybe this path just isn't for me. Then I met Bill, and he took such an interest in my undergraduate science background and seemed so genuinely invested in helping me to find a way to develop it into a career in science journalism that I knew I had found my home. I loved his lecture about his own work covering space technology and the patient way he taught us to organize a basic news story. He built such a beautiful community of like-minded people, which I've relied on over the course of my journalism career. I feel fortunate to have known him. He will be missed. Bill wasn't always so patient. I'll just read one more quick one. This is from Julie Laubach, who was a Sherp 24, so again, one of Bill's final classes. I think many people in the room can relate to this. Julie says, Bill gave me my first F. I had missed the lead in a news story, grounds for an automatic fail. I remember crying in his office at the bleak future I envisioned for myself as Bill waited patiently, unfazed. Of course, I did graduate and now regard that F as a rite of passage, a reminder that failing is essential to succeeding. I'll always remember him for being an animated, passionate teacher whose stories revealed an insatiable curiosity and dedication to the craft. Because of Bill and his pioneering science journalism program, I found my calling, and I'm forever grateful. So long, Mom. I'll miss you.
The asteroid threat.
Whoever wants to go next, maybe we can sort of stand ready over there.
I was sent by my father and my uncle. My dad, Richard, says he had two big brothers growing up, his biological brother, David, and his non-biological brother, Bill. So he was always known to me as Uncle Bill. Bill's own father died when he was young, and as a child, he had actually been willed to my grandparents in case something happened to his mother, Helen. So they lived right next door to each other in the old neighborhood. Heard about the old neighborhood. This was on Booth Street, and my dad and my grandparents and my uncle lived there until 1947. So the family spent a lot of time together, adjacent apartments. They would close the screen doors in the warmer months and the days before air conditioning, and then they would have all the kids and everybody play together. When my dad was about 4.5 years old, Bill persuaded him to stand up to the neighborhood bully. And he promised to give my dad a ride in the red radio flyer wagon. True to his word, Bill kept the promise. My dad says times were very different at that point for screens, and let's just say that the parental controls were a little bit more lax. Even though my dad's family moved to California in the 1950s, Dad and Bill stayed close and kept a consistent correspondence with letters and postcards. My dad would visit Bill whenever he came to the East Coast, and he was honored to be the best man at Bill's wedding. He also had the pleasure of giving a guest lecture about his role as a deputy district attorney for major frauds in Los Angeles. He got to be interrogated by the journalism students, and he enjoyed every minute of it and said that Bill was just an amazing professor who inspired his students. Dad remembers that Bill's students, the one thing that really stood out was they asked great questions. You have to have that balance between the skepticism and cynicism, but also the optimism, as I've heard several people talk about with Bill. So I think his students were inspired by him. His sense of humor was infectious, as my dad says. His love of history was incredible and inspirational. Just an example, Bill sent me a copy of his book, Asteroid Threat, and he told me to watch my asteroid. So, and many, a little bit more, sorry. So, it was always a pleasure. It was always a huge event in my family when Uncle Bill came to visit California, which he did very frequently because he would go to JPL or Caltech or Edwards Air Force Base when he was working on his books on reconnaissance, aviation, and space exploration. So, as a little kid, I would love to listen to Bill tell his stories. A particularly good one was when he came out with the book Deep Black about spy satellites. He was giving a book talk in Washington, D.C., and apparently every single copy sold out in the National Capital Region because military attaches were snapping up copies to find out what the U.S. could really do, or maybe couldn't really do. So this is when the Cold War was still on, so late 1980s. Bill was always generous with his time and his encouragement. I count Bill as one of the major influences behind my decision to become a historian. I'm an academic historian. I wrote about the Nixon administration. And I became interested in U.S.-Russian relations, largely inspired by conversations with Bill. He would tell me about the opportunities with the wall coming down and the Soviet Union dissolving, that you could actually get the other side of the story now. So something that was denied previously. He encouraged me to study Russian language to try to learn that. As technology improved and costs went down, my dad and Uncle Bill shared more phone calls and eventually emails and texts. He frequently forward Uncle Bill's emails, or sometimes I get them directly, with the joke of the day or trivia about World War II, fun things like that. My grandmother, this is my copy, but when my grandmother passed away, I inherited her copies of Bill's book, all of his books. Oh, sorry. My grandmother had a picture of Bill in a pressure suit, like an astronaut suit, in front of I think it was a U-2 spy plane. I could be mistaken, but he got to go on a high altitude flight at some point. So I'm wondering if he also got his taste for vodka from my grandmother. So she didn't have the martinis, she held the vermouth and just drank the straight vodka. But he always inscribed every copy of his books to my grandmother, to Aunt Mimi, with love, Bill. And just to wrap this up, my dad thinks of Bill constantly, wanted to convey that. He has models of a Sopwith Camel and a Fokker triplane, the DR-1, hanging up in his bedroom in his vacation house in kind of tribute to Uncle Bill, because of Bill's biography, which is quite excellent, written in the 1970s on Baron von Richthofen. So I did a book report on this in 7th grade. So anyways, we all have Bill with us. He has inspired us. He was an inspirational and passionate teacher, friend, the kind of friend that becomes family. And I think we're all better for it, and may his memory be a blessing. Thank you.
So while Tariq comes up, just a logistical, this is not a church service. You should feel free to, Bill would want this, have another drink, get another plate of food, make yourself at home. Lots of folks want to speak because Bill was such a compelling guy. Go ahead, Tariq.
Hello, everybody. My name is Tarek. I'm from SERP 20. And I love space. I always have loved space. I'm a little kid, loved space, launched rockets, they exploded, it was great. And so when my parents asked me what I wanted to be, you're a junior in high school, you have to decide what you're going to be, for the rest of your life. I said, well, I'll be a sci-fi writer, that'll be great. My mom said, that's nice, dear, but maybe you can be a reporter instead. They still do writing, and you could do the space thing on the side, that'll be great. And I thought, hey, that's perfect. So then I went to undergraduate school for print journalism because newspapers were the only thing that I knew. And in intro to journalism, I met this great TV reporter, and I was like, well, have you ever written about space? And he's like, oh, God, the space shuttles. 30 seconds, they launch, 30 seconds, they land, you're done, that's it, the news is over. So that was it. I was like, okay, I guess it's not a thing. And I went to work for the Los Angeles Times and did city reporting and education reporting, and we all got laid off, and the writing was on the wall, and I had to find something new to do. And in scrolling through the websites of science and writing, I found NYU, and that was great. And I remember talking to Sarah, Bill's assistant. And she said, he's gonna really wanna meet you. And I thought that was really strange because I'm not a scientist. In fact, I failed differential equations twice, and it was really, really embarrassing because my little sister was in that class with me. So I met with Bill. It was March, it was cold, it was rainy. I thought that's what New York was. And I'm from California, it's always sunny. And I sat on the side of his desk, which I already thought was weird because I'd never had a meeting like that before. And he's like, it's gonna be great, it's gonna be great. And I learned two things. Number one is better never than late. And number two is do your research, because I did not know that Bill was a space reporter. And I did not know until that day that you could be a space reporter, that it was a job that you could actually do, not just something that other reporters did. And it was really surprising, because the next week we found out in class that there was this whole other place called space.com, and that they were looking for interns. And that was 2001. And through Bill's encouragement and the other students' encouragement, I did apply, I did get there, and I have been there for 23 years now. And it was all inspired by meeting Mom that first time and finding out that it was a job you could do, and you just have to go and find your niche. And I think that's something that I've tried to instill in my own daughter. My daughter's 15, and she loves things that aren't space. And I'm sure there's a way that she can go out there and find a career that will be that passion. But my inspiration was Mom, and I was very saddened to see the obituary in the New York Times. But I am gladdened that I had met him, and that I was at least a small part of his life, and that he was a big part of mine. Thanks.
Tariq was too modest to mention that he's the editor-in-chief of Space.com, right? Yeah. And here's a mug that says "Better late than never." That was one of Bill's slogans. Yeah, sorry. Better never than late.
I'm Art Blazer, and well, actually, I think I know Bill Burrows longer than almost everybody else in the room, because I was a student of his before SERP was even a figment of his imagination. I said almost everybody. I never called him Mom, never celebrated Mother's Day as his birthday. I always called him on March 27th, which was his real birthday. And he would always get annoyed because it kept reminding him he was getting older. But I know him back when he lived on 154 Burn Street in Forest Hills, and when he went to Stanford and then to East Haven, and New Westport and East Haven. I know him a long time. But I think the best thing I can do to tell you my relationship with Bill is to read what I wrote to Joel after he passed away, because that really sums up a long relationship with Bill. I transferred into NYU to study journalism. And when I got to NYU, I had to take all the classes, but I was a third-year student. And he was my advisor, randomly chosen. And I get to school, and all the early classes were filled up. And he said he'd overwrite, and he'd let me, but speak to another professor first. But if they wouldn't put me in this class, he would take me. He said, save me the trouble. I'll take you. Best move I ever made. So first day of classes, what does Bill do? He says, you're going to write in every class because the only way to be a journalist is to be able to write. So every class, you're going to write something. First assignment, I want you to write your own obituary. Now, I wish that he had said, cause of death has not yet been determined, because I spent half the class figuring out how I was going to kill myself. But really, all he wanted to know was he wanted to get to know his students, which is something he was very good at. And it was very, very important. Now, Bill was tough. He'd tell his students that if you misspelled any 3 words in any paper, you were going to get an F on that paper. Or any 3 words or any proper noun. An automatic F. A very important lesson for all of us to learn. Well, skip ahead to the end of that term. Our final paper for that class was to be worth the same as 2 stories we'd written in class, meaning double. So it could really help or hurt our grade. Our assignment, write a biography about him. But we were prohibited from talking to any of the teachers or to Joel or any member of the faculty so that we wouldn't bother these people who had work to do and didn't want all the students bothering them. Well, I was a little clever. I discovered how to reach his mother. And I interviewed his mother about him for a biography for class. And he thought that was very creative. But it came time to turn in the paper. So I turned it in a couple days early. And in the final class, he walks over to me and nonchalantly says, as everybody else is handing in their final on the last day. By the way, you misspelled the name of my book. I think I turned white from panic because the book was Richthofen. And misspelling a proper noun meant an automatic F. And I was sitting there sweating. But he said, not to worry. Turns out instead of giving me an A, he gave me a B on the paper. But I was a nervous wreck until I saw the result of that, because I thought for sure I was getting an F on my final. But it taught me the importance of proofreading. Now, I also got to know Bill outside of class, because he drafted me to become the president of the fraternity Sigma Delta Chi, which was a journalism fraternity. And so I got to see him outside of class in addition to inside class. And I took his second class. So I got to know him a lot and kept in touch with him over many years. I went into radio, not print. But my first job was in Gillette, Wyoming. Bill was one of the 3 references I had on my first resume, and I'm sure it helped me get my first job. So, as one of his former students, I have a collection of his books, the full collection, I think, of all the books, all autographed and written to me. I'll put the other 4 out on the table. I understand we're missing a few over here for tonight. But he was very special to me. He was more than just a teacher. He became a friend. And it's been many, many, many years. And it's not going to be the same without him.
I just want to salute Art briefly for doing something really spectacular, which is that he organized a surprise luncheon for Bill. How many years ago was that, Art? Yeah, 6 or 7 years ago, and God, he loved it. He was totally shocked. Joel walked him in, and he was just agape, and it was a beautiful thing. Go ahead, Karen.
Hello, I'm Karen McNulty Walsh. I'm a SERP 7 before the H was added. So I'm close to an original SHERP student, at least in the single digits and still in the 1980s. I learned about, I keep getting tongue twisted on it now. SERP, not SHERP. I know, but it just doesn't come out right. I learned about NYU's science journalism program from a friend of Bill Burrows, from Richard Severo, a friend and colleague, who was a fellow reporter, I believe at the Washington Post, maybe also at the New York Times. He was a visiting professor at Vassar College, where I was a biology student who did not want to become a doctor or a teacher or a scientist, because I used to set things on fire in the lab. So that I knew that wasn't my calling, and I had always been told I was a decent writer or a good writer, even though I kind of hated writing because I tortured myself over it. But one night I went to a lecture on journalism by Richard Severo, just kind of a career talk, I guess, and he advised all of those in attendance to major in something that you're really interested in and passionate about, and then become a journalist in that field. And I was like, I've got a one-up on this already. I'm in my senior year as a biology major. Maybe this is something I can do. So afterwards, I went over and talked to him, and he told me all about this NYU program. And I was like, wow, that sounds really interesting. And it was only the first semester, so I had time to kind of explore still. And I did an internship under Richard Severo's mentorship at the Poughkeepsie Journal. Well, he was my advisor. The editors at the Poughkeepsie Journal were my mentors, although they were not super supportive. But I have to, in this crowd of people who is admiring Bill's space journalism, I have to confess my biggest journalism sin, which was the day the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded, which happened in the morning, I believe. I was in a 4-hour biology lab. This was 1986. There were not TVs everywhere. There were no devices that you could get the news. So I had no idea what had happened. until many hours later when I was walking through the College Center and saw it on TV. But my editor at the Poughkeepsie Journal was still furious that I did not call and offer my services. And I was like, wait, you would want me, this like intern, to cover the biggest space disaster? Are you kidding me? And they were like, well, you could have at least interviewed some of the physics professors at Vassar about, what happened and maybe done something. So that lesson was, to me, was that I did not want to be a daily news reporter because I never wanted to have to respond to things on that kind of timescale. But I was interested in this science writing program that Severo told me about. So after graduation, a couple of years later, I finally got in touch and applied for the program and gratefully got accepted and was chosen to be the graduate assistant for that year. Sorry, just gonna my. So I worked as the graduate assistant during my year and a half at SHRP, and learned more than I ever imagined I would about science writing, journalism, the world, and life in general, thanks to Bill's generosity and that of the other professors and students in SHRP. I maintained close contact with Bill, especially in those early years, because I was working as a science journalist right down the block from NYU at Scholastic, and moved up the ranks from their lowest person on the masthead to become the editor of that magazine, Scholastic Science World, written for middle school students. And I hired many Sherpies as freelancers and for positions on our staff. It was with Bill that our class, when I was in school, went to visit Brookhaven National Laboratory. He took the class every year, and so does Dan, or did Dan. We're gonna talk, we're gonna get it to happen again. So 10 years of writing for children, when I got engaged to a guy who had a beautiful house on Long Island near the beach, I said, hey, there's that lab out there that we visited, maybe I could get a job there. And I talked to Bill about it because I was a little nervous. I was going from journalism for kids to PR. But it wasn't like hawking a product. It wasn't like trying to sell something. It was trying to tell the stories of amazing science that happened at Brookhaven National Laboratory. And he thought it was great. And he thought it was a good idea for someone who was about to get married, maybe start a family, and wanted to settle down somewhere. I've been there for almost 25 years. And I've hosted many SHRP classes for those visits. And I hope that those have inspired them as much as my long ago trip inspired me. Many writers who share their enthusiasm for science and who ask probing questions to keep science and scientists honest and accountable owe so much to Bill. I am so very fortunate to have had such a wonderful lifelong mentor and to be part of the SHRP family. Having lost my dad not long after I graduated from SHRP, I may have leaned a little harder into Bill and Sarah, because I was very close with her as well, than I realized at the time. He was always there with encouragement and advice. And of course, we all called him Mom. As many of you, or some of you, may know, I very recently lost my real mom. In fact, on Bill's birthday, March 27th. Just found that out tonight. I can't remember if they ever met, but maybe somewhere up there near the orbit of Bill's asteroid that was named for him, my dad, my mom, and Bill are talking about global politics, extraterrestrial living, and having an awesome Italian meal because he loved that red sauce with meatballs at, what is it? Was it called Severo's? Savino's Hideaway out on Long Island, where we always went when the Brookhaven when the NYU students came to Brookhaven. So thank you, Bill. Thank you, SHRP, for a wonderful life, and I'm so glad there are so many members of this family.
So while Ben comes up, here's another quick email. This is from Dan Drolette, who is a SHRP 12. As everyone here knows, Bill liked to be referred to as Mom because of his generous and giving nature. I was to get firsthand examples of this at least twice. The first time was when Bill wrote one of the required letters of recommendation to the Fulbright Committee on my behalf, a letter which apparently worked because I found myself in Australia on a Fulbright postgrad traveling fellowship a year later. The second time I treasure even more, and occurred while I was under fire for my coverage of a scientific controversy down under. Long story short, I uncovered that a scientist was getting irreproducible results, causing a phony public health scare in Australia in the process. When I exposed this fact for the news section of the Journal of Science, the scientists claimed that the reason no one else in the world could get the same result was because their labs aren't good enough. I was taking a lot of flack from the scientists who tried to get me kicked out of my host institution in Australia, which would have led to deportation. Even the US ambassador eventually got involved. And I emailed Bill about what to do, giving him all the details. And Bill emailed back with exactly the words I needed to hear. As a journalist, you're not doing your job unless someone's mad at you. He would usually say pissed off at you, but whatever. Well done on the article. I'm a very proud mother. Go ahead, Ben.
So I'm Ben Leach. I'm from SHRP 25, which I think that's the last of the transitional years with Bill. Yes. So made it, was here for the 25th anniversary as a relatively new student. I wanted to start off with an anecdote. As Dan said, he liked to repeat anecdotes and jokes, so there's probably a lot of you who have heard this one. So obviously he had an interest in flight. I remember going into this office for the first time and seeing World War II aircraft pictures framed around the office, and I was like, I think I found the right place, because that was something my dad was interested in. And he would tell us this story about how he got to fly in a jet fighter once, and they told him to eat a banana before he went on the flight. And he's like, banana? Why would I want to eat a banana? And they said, because it tastes the same going in as it does coming out. As Dan alluded to, journalism, we're seeking the truth, much like scientists. So you want to verify your facts. So, you know, we all had a good laugh, ha ha ha. While I was a student here, I was an intern at CNN's medical unit with Sanjay Gupta. And while I was there, he had the opportunity to fly on a jet fighter. And I said, did they tell you about eating anything before the flight? He's like, yeah, a banana. And I said, and why did they tell you that? Like, I expected the result, and sure enough, he said, because it goes in the same as it does coming out. So, so I thought it was a nice way to, and I was so excited to tell the other students, like, it's not that Bill wasn't lying. It was that it was nice to have that confirmation to see that that story was being shared, and they're likely telling it to a bunch of other novices flying in jet fighters to this day. So, but I will always remember Bill telling that. I have a special connection with Bill through undergrad, and I was not an undergrad at NYU. I was an undergrad at the College of New Jersey, as was this weird triad where 3 years in a row we had students from TCNJ. And I think a lot of that had to do with a former student of Bill's named Kim Pearson, who was one of my professors. So she just retired from TCNJ this year, and I asked her if I could share some memories with her. So she was not a Sherpie or a Serpie, but she was one of the students that he consulted with when founding the program. So she had went to Princeton for undergrad, worked at Fox Chase Cancer Center for a few years, and realized that she wanted to be in health journalism or communication. And she made that the focus in her news and feature classes to the degree that she could at the time, because SERP did not exist. And at that point, they were hiring adjuncts to teach science reporting. This is all at NYU while Bill is here. These are her words. I was one of the students that Bill talked to about SHRP and how it might serve students. He was department chair. He talked me through the program design and asked what I thought. I told him that if it had been available when I started, I would have chosen it. I also told him about things that I found problematic. For example, one thing I realized as a result of the class that I had taken was that students needed more science background than the program afforded. I benefited from my 2 years at Fox Chase and my close relationships with people who were getting doctorates in chem and biochem, but a lot of students didn't. Even if the professors didn't understand some of the nuances of medical publishing, how there were PR firms who would take money from industry to have people like me ghostwrite articles with the doctor's bylines that would circulate through a media ecosystem designed to lend a veneer of legitimacy. They sent me on an interview at one of those places. I came back and I told them why I wouldn't work for an outlet like that. I have no idea about what my impact my words or those of other students might have had. I do know that they were all ecstatic when I landed a job at Bell Labs. It was a very proud moment when I got to lead tours of the labs for Bill, Mitch, and the first cohort of SHRP students. So when I told her that I was thinking of applying to NYU, she was like, Bill Burrows, Bill Burrows. I'm like, who? That's the director of the program. So when I saw her excitement, because she was one of the first to really encourage me to go into science writing, I realized that I had made a right decision, and I have never once regretted that decision for my career as a science writer to this day. I'm very fortunate that I overlapped with Bill. My first job, full-time job after I graduated this program was at a newspaper as a health, science, and environment reporter. And it's still my favorite job I've ever had. Like Karen, I now work in PR, but the legacy of Bill will live strong whenever I've had the pleasure of arranging an interview with someone who graduated from this program. It is always the best programs, the best informed reporters, the most well-researched, the best questions, and the best articles that come out of it. So the influence for the 500 alumni that have graduated this program, thank you, Bill, because we have responsible science writing that will live on for years to come.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sandy Shapiro. I don't have a prepared talk because I didn't prepare a talk. So I'm just going to share some personal memories and observations about a man I deeply respected and loved. I was a faculty wife. That's not an entree into a sensational story. It is a description of where I was and how I met people. And what it was an entree to was meeting a bunch of wonderful, intelligent, creative people that I would not have met if I hadn't come to those annual parties, and also meeting and really coming to care about very deeply Bill's family, Joelle, Julie, Lara, who was a schoolgirl when I first met her, and who became a bride later on with me as one of the witnesses of that lovely occasion. These are deep memories I'll carry with me. The two things that are observations about Bill. Well, first of all, let me tell you a little bit about the faculty at that time. My husband was Robert Shapiro. He was a biochemist and taught in that program, and his interest was origin of life. And Bill's curiosity took in everybody. So Bob was one of the teachers, and I also remember Don Pizzarello, who, as my husband did, passed away. And Don was a radiologist who wrote the standard textbook on the topic and was always an interesting person to talk to. And a living person from that group was Toby Rossman. If you're watching or listening out there, hi, Toby, who was a biochemist. So I got to know these people and really enjoy their minds and their personalities and their friendship. The two observations I have of Bill, they really stem from one sense, that this guy had range. You know, it was like his arms were big, and it could encompass many people and many, many ideas. And I felt that he could deal with polar opposites. You know, on the one hand, he could be very focused, very precise, very, very careful. I remember looking at his office in his home, and it was meticulously organized with, of course, stickets all over the place, but he had it was clean as a whistle, the books were lined up, everything was set out for a person who wanted to work at something. So there was that focus. At the other end of it was the most unapologetic, exuberant consumer of alcohol that has no focus. And he could sort of stick out his arms and encompass the whole thing. The other part of the range that I'll talk about is why and why not. And that's another characteristic of Bill's. The why was the inquisitive mind. Why does this happen? Why did someone say that? Why is this taken for granted? And he would penetrate into that cloud. The why not was his creativity and his willingness to entertain new ideas. And that's the sensibility of this guy, and that's what I will remember. I have no other fancy words to say, but just that I loved him, respected him. I wish he were here with us because he'd had something very funny to say. Take care.
That was really beautiful. Thank you. While Peter comes up, here's just a quick Bill email interregnum from Bill's old friend Ira Epstein, who could not be here today, but really wanted me to read this email. It's from Bill fairly recently. Good morning, Judge Epstein. And I have nostalgic memories of sleeping on the sofa in the Harvard Law School lounge after coming all the way up here from Gotham to date Judy Hood, sorry, Joan, who was at the Forsyth Dental Center studying to be a hygienist, and who soon moved to the Flatlands and married a soldier. You and Dave Obell were very gracious hosts. Whatever happened to Dave? This is Bill's stream of consciousness. And things really could not be going better. My health at age 84 is excellent for 3 reasons. Get ready, this is going to sound familiar. Number 1, I never exercise. People who exercise are always breaking something. Number 2, I eat food that's full of preservatives. And number 3, wait for it, I have a large vodka martini on the rocks at 5:15 every day, because what they taught us in biology at Forest Hills High School is true. Alcohol is a preservative. Wait for it, Lara. Only if you're a frog or a fetal pig, says my daughter, Dr. Lara Burrows. Go ahead, Peter. Come on up.
Hello, everyone. I'm Peter Geller. My vintage goes way back, way further than anybody else who's spoken tonight, even Karen McNulty Walsh. I'm a SERP 1, one of the dinosaurs. Yep, that's it. I don't look a day older than I did in that picture. I honestly have not been able to whittle down what I'd like to say about Bill in just an anecdote or two. I just couldn't do it. And so I'm just going to do little tidbits here and there, if you don't mind. But I do want to say that I go back with Bill to before the program, to 1979. I spoke about this at the 40th celebration, the 40th anniversary, and I'm not going to repeat myself, unlike Bill. I'm not going to repeat myself about that. But I have, Bill was a man of many, many parts, as we all know, and I had the great good fortune and privilege of experiencing many of those. So he was teacher, mentor, friend, confidant, occasional light drinking companion from time to time, and of course, administrator, founder of the program, all those many things and more. And so I just wanted to take a moment to say that I have been fortunate in my life to have had a string of really incredible teachers. I've always cherished good teaching. And Bill was at the top of that list. He was like a great teacher. You know, everybody knows him as like running the program and, you know, being there for students and dealing with the administration and whatnot. But I remember him so much as a great teacher. And, you know, in one of his books that was mentioned before about on reporting the news, this is a little snippet from the jacket cover where he says, "News reporting is a serious affair, but that doesn't mean it has to be pondered like original sin or taught like geometry." I mean, that just is Bill in a nutshell. It totally captures his what's the word? Impish, elvish, elfin spirit. I don't know what to say. But he wasn't just like conveying information. He was teaching with this like incredible spirit. Not just his enthusiasm for the topic, but he just had this joie de vivre really about teaching. So I just wanted to honor that and make sure that people who may not even have experienced him as a teacher understand that about him. In the Geezer department, here's a story that he told over and over and over again. You know, I went up to visit him oftentimes in Connecticut before he went into the assisted living when he still had his place in Westport. And so we'd go out to lunch at his favorite place, and you know, Bill being Bill, of course, he knew all the waiters and everybody else by name and inquired after them. But he also said that he would tell me this story. He said, you know, I was talking to, and I'm sorry, I can't remember who it was, one of his co-faculty members, and I was saying to him, I think I'm starting to become a geezer. And this other professor said, what do you mean starting? You know, he told me that several times, which I guess was proof of his geezerhood at that point. But who cared, because it was Bill, you know, it was delightful to hear every single time. Also, let's get this straight about the Fs. It wasn't, you didn't need to like bury the lead to get an F. One typo on those old manuals that we had, not in this building, but you know, in the old building, that's what we had in 1979, manual typewriters that were really hard to press the keys down on. One typo was an automatic F. So damn sure that we were very careful about copy editing and proofreading our stuff that we submitted for class after that. He wasn't the only one who was doing that. David also was, I mean, maybe this is an NYU thing, but you know, David Rubin was famous for doing that kind of stuff too. One other role that you may not be aware of with Bill is carpenter. I mean, he was handy. And I remember sitting in his office, and he had his hammer and I don't know what all else tools, and it was like, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm making the office the way I need to have this office because the administration's not doing it. I'm just going to do it. I mean, he was doing it. So, sort of like the way he would drive down the Connecticut Turnpike at 80 miles an hour, and he didn't really care if he wasn't worried about being stopped by police. So this is the more reckless side of him, but I would say the more intrepid side. You know, it's like, hey, I'm starting this program. I don't care if you don't want to do it. I'm starting it by hook or crook, and I'm going to build my office the way I want to. If you, the administration, are not going to help me do it, then I'm going to go ahead and do it. So that's Bill. And I think I have just two other things to say. I don't know, I'm not really sure what the history of this is, Dan, but I was actually the only SERP 1 who was not a science major as an undergraduate. When Bill was noodling the program, and we were conferring and meeting, and I was giving him feedback and writing him memos and doing all kinds of stuff that he appreciated, because he was appreciative of the interest in this yet to be formed program. I argued for the inclusion of non-science majors as well, mainly because I was a non-science major, but also because it made sense to me. And so obviously I convinced him of the merit of that argument, because I got admitted and graduated from the program. I got admitted after this wasn't designed for that purpose, but I was already in grad school, and I had given him a paper of mine that I spent like half a year writing, which actually had a scientific resonance to it. It was a paper about what I called Taoist alchemy as a scientific enterprise. So it was me trying to like integrate mystical practices and scientific effort. And he read this paper, and will say he said, "I want you in this program." So he liked the way I wrote, and he thought that that was good enough. While you could teach science majors how to write, you could also teach English majors science. So I did get through it that way. And the last thing is that Bill is much more than the sum of these parts. I think, I honestly, I was in journalism from 1979 student days until 1994, when I resigned my position at the Plain Dealer in Cleveland. And I've turned my life into a different direction. I actually had intended to combine both of them, but that's never happened because I never realized how much work the new direction was. So I went into medicine, Oriental medicine actually. It's always an interest of mine. And, so what I'm saying is that for many, many years after I wasn't even practicing journalism, I was in touch with Bill and saw him and spoke with him. And Dan and other people have said how, Dan especially was talking about how he thinks about Bill almost every day, it's in his mind. Bill is in my mind and in my heart, even though I haven't practiced journalism actively since 1994. And I think of him, and all of his legacy, and graduates, all in publications and news organizations all over the world. And I just think of him as this pervasive presence. He's in my mind. I think of him a lot. And that's it. It's a presence. I don't want to make this sound ridiculous, but like Mahatma Gandhi was the great soul. Bill was a great soul in his own way. And a presence that not only sort of pervades the world in some fashion, but is in everybody's minds and hearts that knew him.
Thank you, Peter. That was amazing. So an automatic F for a typo. There's a bunch of 43s here today, and I'm totally getting some good ideas. Watch out. While the next person comes up, here's a quick email from Maria Cressito, who is a SERP 7. That's 1990. Bill's sense of integrity was unparalleled, both personally and professionally, even to an extreme when he wrote me a beautiful recommendation for a program at the Mount Sinai School of Medicine. He felt it necessary to disclose that Mount Sinai is where his daughter was born, and in the year 1970, and that she was now an MD. He couldn't stop talking about that, Lara. He was always a proud parent to Lara, and he certainly came in a close second, but we certainly came in a close second. His memory of details about me 25 years after my SERP 7 class was astounding. because a mom never forgets, and I will never forget Mom. Love you forever, Bill.
Hi, I'm Charles Berquist, SERP 15. My first memory of Bill was meeting him as coming out of undergrad, looking for a science writing program. And sort of like Tariq, it was a really crappy March day, horrible rain, and I found the office in that sketchy old building. And Sarah, the guardian, said, "You're a little bit early, but you can go in. You can go in." And so I went in, and I'd done basic research on the program, but I hadn't done research on Bill. And so I sit down, Bill was messing with something, and I look behind his desk, and I see the books. And by some stroke of luck, I had read Deep Black. And so he turns around, and I said, "Oh, you wrote Deep Black?" And he said, "Yeah, well, yes." And we proceed to have a 15 or 20-minute long conversation about spy satellites. And eventually Bill says, "Well, this has all been very interesting, but I really have to go. There's a prospective student that needs to come in to talk to me." And you hear Sarah from out, "This is him, Bill." And so Bill looks and says, "This doesn't mean you get in." And then we started talking about the program. It turned out I did get in, but I think one part that hasn't been mentioned yet, I mean, so many aspects of Bill, but in addition to being mom and a teacher, he was also everybody's greatest cheerleader. I was standing in that sketchy hallway with the classrooms on one side and that long expanse of bulletin board on the other. They had piled the manual typewriters out in the hallway because while we had computers, Bill didn't fully trust them yet and still wanted to have the manual ones on standby. And there was a note tacked to the bulletin board about internship at Science Friday, the radio program. And I was looking at it, and Bill comes by and says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm looking at this." And he said, "Well, call them." And I said, "But I've only been here for like 2 months. I don't know anything. Usually internships, that's like a year in, right?" And he's like, "The phone's down there, call them." And so I called them, and now 20-something years later, I'm still there. So yeah, Bill found a way to convince everybody to do the right thing, whether it be in their writing or in their career path. And as Peter said, there's this presence, right? It's 20-something years later, and you still hear Bill's voice in the back of your head every once in a while, usually saying something like, "Damn it, no, that's not the lead. What's the story?" Or, of course, better never than late. Or just saying, write it like you mean it. Write it the right way. Write it the way that makes sense to you, with spirit and curiosity, and write it like you mean it. And that's what I hear Bill saying, and I miss him.
That was wonderful, Charles. So while Martha comes up, here's a quick note from Apoorva Mandavilli, highly accomplished journalist for the Times. Apoorva says, "I was in Sherp 17. When I first met Bill, a few weeks before I started the program, I still felt very much like an international student. I was new in NYC despite 8 years in the Midwest, and was completely taken aback by Bill introducing himself to me as my mother." That would be alarming. Honestly, I never warmed to that moniker, but I'm here to tell you that you don't have to think of Bill as mom to be grateful to him. At a time when almost no one was talking about it, Bill was attentive to diversity. and to the reasons that might make it difficult for people of certain backgrounds to study journalism. He gave me an extremely generous scholarship because he knew I couldn't afford the program without it. Without Bill's thoughtfulness, I'm not sure I would have become a journalist at all. Thanks, Bill. You changed my life.
Well, I'm glad that Apurva chimed in for SERP 17, but and I had intended to come up just to make sure that we were represented. But I'm Martha Heil. I just wanted to tell one story about Bill and then split. Our class was sent out to cover some product release, which didn't even sound like Bill, right? We were going to go to cover some product release downtown, and we were going to check it out. And when we got there, there was no press conference. Why was there no press conference? We don't know. And this was like the first couple weeks of school, and we're like, we can't go back without a story. What are we going to do if we don't have a story? If we come back to Bill, the journalist with the cigar and the F, you know, the ever-threatening F. So we all split up and reported our own stories and came back with something, and I think it was, you know, I don't even remember what I wrote about at that time, but it was something that I literally scraped off the New York pavement, okay? And it was our story for that day. That's what we did. And it was a real learning experience, and Bill was a great teacher. So, thanks.
So we're really getting a fully nuanced portrait of all the different aspects of Bill. I think it might be time to hear from the person who knew him the best, knows him the best. Joelle was Bill's best friend before, during, and after their long marriage. Joelle, I just really can't even begin to tell you how important Joelle was to Bill and Bill's life, his whole life, ever since they met. So it's a privilege to hear from Joelle Bentley.
My first remarks were not going to be about the fact that I had a knee replacement. Literally 1 week after when Bill went to the 1 week after Bill went to the ICU, and I'm much better, but there we are. I wanted to start the remarks by following up on Dan's suggestion to Bill not long after he retired, when he said, "Bill, when you die, we're going to give you one hell of a send-off." And Bill said to Dan, "Gee, that's great. I'll be sure to be there." That's Bill's amazing, wacky sense of humor. It was a blessing when he came to NYU. If you read the obit I wrote on him, I realized in the first 8 years of our marriage, from 66 to 74, he changed jobs essentially 8 times. And then landed at NYU, and 35 years later, it was just a rock. It was wonderful. It tied in his writing ability, and he loved teaching. He really found himself here. When he got the idea of starting the Science and Environmental Reporting Program, which really came out of the awareness that journalists in the country were not prepared to cover the likes of stories like 3 Mile Island. There were a few basic parts of the program that I'd like to discuss. We've discussed that the core curriculum was this course called Basic Issues in the News. And what made it so relevant was that he would bring in scientists, Bob Shapiro from chemistry, and lots of NYU journalists, but scientists from many areas to teach specifically on the Genome Project or climate control or space exploration or those basic issues in the news. But team taught always with the journalists. So the scientists would present the material, and then it was up to Bill or his colleagues to get kids to figure out how to write about it for a general audience. That's what made the program just take off. The other aspect of the program that was really, to me, so touching was that he understood how much the challenge of writing, to all of the writers in this room, so many of you are writers, that when you're staring at that blank piece of paper or now a computer screen, the competition is really within yourself to figure out how to collect your thoughts. So many of you have talked about this today, and to find your voice to tell that story. Bill, and that's what he taught the kids, that it was so important that they understand that the greatest competition they had was with themselves, not with their fellow students. Rely on your fellow students, communicate with your fellow students. And so many of them have really gotten that message. In fact, in the early classes of SERP, something like 16% of them intermarried. So, is it still happening, Dan? Still lots of SERP marriages, it's amazing. So for the students here in this room, clearly Bill's touched your lives. And what I want to say to you is that it was so mutual. It came so back. It meant so much to him to have contact with you and to continue contact. I think during his retirement in the last 15 years, one of his greatest joys was to hear from his students, and you were wonderful about it. And to the faculty members here, you know, Bill was so proud of this department. He loved NYU. He loved his fellow faculty. I know that there were really raucous faculty meetings when people wanted to strangle him. I get it. But at the end of the day, he really loved it. And Bill always said the best thing he ever did was to turn his program over to Dan Fagan. It was just, this man has so taken the nugget. The fabulous jewel of a program that Bill did create, for sure, and launch. He hated administration. He loved the kids, he loved teaching, but he wanted to be up in Stanford writing books or being with kids. He didn't have the patience to do what Dan has done so brilliantly, which is so absolutely exponentially expand the reach and breadth of this program. All the while also writing a Pulitzer Prize winning book, something Bill never achieved. So Dan, you are really phenomenal. And I must say, out of all of Bill's achievements, I think the great thing that came out of our union, our 37 years of marriage and my 22 years of recovery, is producing our absolutely beautiful daughter, Laura. He's so proud of you. Laura. Laura has administered so attentively to his medical decline over the years. And believe me, he was a challenging patient. And she was really heroic. And Laura, with her fabulous husband, Human, have produced our two spectacular grandchildren. So I'm going to be obnoxious and brag about them. Laura left no stone unturned in terms of her own career. And she understood. She certainly got the message from her father that academic excellence was something that one should achieve. And she said it's not enough to have top A students. These kids need something else. And the something else turned out to be that they both have made Team USA in their respective sports. Sophie as a synchronized ice skater. Tommy, nationally ranked in squash, played with Team USA in the World Cup in Australia last summer. These two amazing, beautiful kids. We're very proud of you. So, thank you all so much for being here. Dan, thank you so amazingly for bringing us all together. It is so touching. your dedication to Bill is just, I mean, it's really so heartwarming. So who else wants to come up and speak? Oh, good.
Hi, my name is Jerry Regan. I'm a graduate of SERP 2. And I couldn't let this august occasion slip by without representing my class. I had no idea who would ultimately be showing up. I'm thrilled that I'm able to evoke that particular set of memories. Bill, for all of the nomenclature of mom, he was more like a dad to me. He was a father figure, with all of the mishigas and the ambivalence that that created in my own emotional set. He arranged for me to have a very substantial amount of money to come into the program. I couldn't figure out why. I had a lot of self-image problems, challenges, but Bill saw something in me clearly that I probably couldn't see in myself. And I was interested in journalism. I thought Columbia was too intimidating. I had very limited experience. I had a degree in mathematics, which I think wowed Bill for some reason. And he came up with some money, and it was the affirmation. I didn't really need the money. It was the affirmation that meant the world to me. I think about Bill, somebody mentioned headspace. I think the idea that when I see Bill's photos here, and particularly that smile, it's almost as if he's still there in my mind space. I haven't spoken or seen Bill in probably 20 years, but he is an unforgettable figure who provided me a real head start as a storyteller. And even though I'm thinking to myself, Bill, I would call affectionately a space cadet, I never had a particular interest in science journalism. I was interested in getting into journalism. This program offered me an opportunity, and I never look back. I always think like I must be an outlier in this program. I don't even read space stories, to tell you the truth. I frankly find them boring, which would appall Bill. But he was never one to judge, so he would take that probably as part of my own idiosyncrasy. But unforgettable person. Even if with the absence of 20 years, there's no way that I could let an opportunity go by to let Bill know what a giant figure he was in my life. Thank you.
Does anyone else have anything that they want to say? You know, I think, first of all, even though the testimony, the public testimony portion of the celebration of Bill's life is over now, please hang out, relax, talk to each other. We still have food, we still have dessert, we still have wine, we still have alternative beverages, as we used to call them in college, non-alcoholic. Whatever you want. We've even got a little vodka left in Bill's honor. So please hang out. But, you know, in the spirit of Bill being with us in this room, I think we should close by giving Bill the standing ovation that he deserves. Thank you, Bill. Thank you for being a part of our lives, and thank you for being a part of his life. Relax, enjoy yourself.